Okay, let's have a class, and we will finish the antibiotics. Then we'll move on to bacterial control. And Thursday, we will do a review of all the practice exam questions on the eCampus. Then next week, Tuesday, we will not have a lab because we'll have a second exam of the lecture. Basically, second exam, a little bit difficult than the first one, because there is a lot of the bacteria there, and some of the case study you already see the practice exam questions. But if you do the same thing for them as you did for the exam 1, which means you are study them and do all the practice questions, and you should be okay. Okay, we will be follow closely with the practice questions. So let's do a brief review. What is antibiotics? Then we talk about today's stuff. So we mentioned about antibiotics is metabolic chemicals naturally, I will say naturally, generate from one microorganism to inhibit or kill another microorganism. And I said most of the time, this first microorganism most of the time is like moles or even yeast, which is eukaryotes, and that another microorganism most of the time we talk about is bacteria. And then we mentioned about very important concept here. It's called minimal inhibitory concentration. Minimal inhibitory concentration. Because this is important for antibiotics, especially used in the human being. We want the dose is as low as possible. If the higher dose, it could be killed the normal bacteria in the stomach area, not in the stomach area, in the intestinal area, could be balanced out of your normal bacteria. So that's the concentration is important. We wish that to be the slower the better, and usually we wish it could be reached microgram per ml level. Now we mentioned there are the 3 methods we can use to determine the MIC, in calling that E-strip. We call it an E-test, we call it. And we most of the time we will do is a 2-fold C-area dilution. And we see the test tube, which one is first showing transparent, which means no bacteria is grow. And the last one we will do in the lab is Kirby-Boer test. This is a portabacteria in a disc strip. Then we press her, and then we put it into a monohalton agar. Then we to see the inhibitory zone surrounded the disc. And compared to the table, the standard table, so we'll determine whether it is resistant, susceptible, or intermediate. So this is what we talk about already, some basic information about antibiotics. Now today, we want to talk about is the mechanism of antibiotics, which means how they kill bacteria. And we will be mentioned very detailed about one group of the bacteria, which is penicillin. So first of all, this slide tells you very simple, the 5 targets of antibacterial mechanism, which is basically number 1, will be cell wall. Number 2 is cell membrane system. Now, very specific, they'll focus on the proteins area. Okay, number 3, it could be the DNA, some of the genetics information there. Number 4, that could be to prevent the metabolic pathway. And the last one, you will cause like a cell division. We will say it's a cell integrity. Okay, cell membrane integrity. Integrity. So the first question you should ask yourself, which method is most effective? And which method is also safe for the human being and animals among these 5 basic mechanisms? We would be picking number 1. Now why? Because you know that the human being and animal cell, there is no cell wall. And the bacterial cell have a cell wall. So if your target attacking point is cell wall structure, then it should be basically say it is safe for the human being to use. Because human being has a cell membrane system. So if the antibiotics, their target is a protein transcription, translation, or synthesis, then this will be basically have a very strong side effect for the people who use it. We'll mention it. Okay? So basically, this is safe to be used and more effective. And usually remember the target is peptidoglycan. Because that's a very obvious heavy structure of the cell wall, especially for gram-positive bacteria. If you still remember the question in the exam asked you to draw the structure of the label the structure of gram-positive bacteria. Cell membrane, this is usually have a very severe side effect. The side effect, if we know, you have some experience before, maybe it's going to be caused like a hearing loss, like a yellow teeth, and also could be decreased your white blood cell, red blood cell, also going to infect your bone marrow system, which is the immune system. So that's a side effect. Some of the antibiotics, they may be attacking the DNA replication process. We will talk about detail real quick. But I want to tell you one thing, this is the least effective one. At 3 negative. Why? Because the bacterial replication, we learned about, is just a very general procedure. They have a lot of the bypass for them to resist and recover in an advanced environment. So this is, if you have something attacking to the DNA replication, that will say most ineffective from a medical standpoint. Another thing you also know that bacteria will generate lots of the mutations. So that's least effective. How about the preventive metabolic pathway? This is, I will say, most of the time is a static, which means it's only going to inhibit bacterial growth, not really going to kill bacteria. And the last one, the cell membrane integrity. What will be the good example? Ornament. You can get a gel-like medicine for the skin from the ornament, from the CVS or Walgreens. That is basically attacking points in the cell membrane integrity. This is the medicine usually is on the surface, skin surface. External use, not going to orally take it. Okay? So this is the overview of all these antibacterial mechanisms. We mentioned, emphasized here, the inhibition of cell wall synthesis should be most effective. Because bacteria have a cell wall, human and animal do not have a cell wall structure. Next, we want to talk about one group of drugs, of antibiotics. We call it the beta-lactam. They are going to be the attacking points in the cell wall. So we basically going to talk about is the penicillin. And then we will mention vancomycin and the bacitracin. So we want to talk about these one by one, okay? This is a very interesting topic we could talk about. So first of all, we want to mention about the penicillin. You need to know the basic structure of penicillin. Penicillin have a basic structure. It's some kind of like this. Then we go up to here, we have a, I need to log this a little bit. We go up to here, we have S, we have a C, CH3, CH3, then we have Go here, we have a CH. Go here, and then we have a COOH. And then we go from here, you will see basically is C. We have a NH, then for C. This is basically is a base. This is a base. And here is usually is an amino acid base. In this structure, we will say this penicillin, it is 6' amino penicillic acid. Because it is the acid. The key point here is this guy. This beta-lactam ring. Okay, why this is important? This is going to go back to our talk about some of the mechanism, the structure of the cell wall. Remember, peptidoglycan. What it looks like? They are modified sugar, which is NMN, N-acetylmuramic acids, N-acetylglucosamine, N-acetylmuramic acids, N-acetylglucosamine. They are long and long chain. Okay? So we'll have a second one, we're going to be the same thing. So we just draw the two lines. So modified sugar has one line. And then we say it's connected with each other. Connected with each other with what? Amino acid. What is amino acids? Basically, it is D-alanine, 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 D-alanine. This is a basic, of course, the glycine. There is a basic amino acids. So what happened is, when we have bacteria synthesize this peptidoglycan, through the modified sugar connected with amino acids, and they have these peptides needs to be linked together. And this process we call transpeptidation. And this transpeptidation needs an enzyme, which is called transpeptidase, or transpeptase. AAC means an enzyme. So bacteria need this guy to work. The beta-lactam ring could directly attack into here, and will be attaching to, so let's say if this is like this beta-lactam ring or lactam drugs could attach to the enzyme and will let the enzyme doesn't work. So therefore, it could be prevent a bacteria to biosynthesize peptidoglycan. If there's no peptidoglycan, then the cell wall will be starting to cracking. So the bacteria will be killed. And very ironically, this transpeptidase, the scientific area gives them the name called penicillin binding protein. We call it PBPS. The reason is when they first find it, they are doing the research for the antibiotic mechanism of the penicillin. They find this enzyme, so they name it a penicillin binding protein. It's a very ironic name, to be honest. So this is the way they're going to work it. So therefore, at the beginning, when we have a penicillin, which is, we call it a penicillin G. Now penicillin G, we mentioned, these basic structures are the same. The only difference is this side chain R is different. So what does this R looks like? This is R looks like this, and then the goal is CH2. Go and N, H, is that right? Then they go here, and there is a beta-lactal ring, so we can draw. Draw here, then we go CH, COOH. On the top, we have S, and we have C, they're connected with CH3 and CH3. Basically, it's right here. It's a very interesting, that's a penicillin G at the beginning. However, penicillin G is sensitive to stomach acid. So, penicillin G is only muscle injection. When I was young, like 4 or 5 years old, I remember go to the hospital. You have to have a injected in your muscle, in your butts, then to take a penicillin. That's not very nice, to be honest. So people think about, we're going to develop something. Okay, to develop something become penicillin V. The penicillin V, the good thing is that it can be orally taken because it is acid resistant. And I'll tell you one thing, what's the difference between penicillin G to penicillin V? The only difference, they are adding an O2 here. This is all the same. The only thing is add that one. They become resistant for the acid. So, at this moment, penicillin G and penicillin V, basically, they are only working for a bacteria is gram-positive bacteria. Not only gram-positive bacteria, the gram-positive bacteria is growing in a growing status. The reason is they are synthesized peptidoglycan. I want to stop it. Then later, what's going to happen? Penicillin G, penicillin V comes out very soon, start to have a resistant. They're not very good. That comes out. Because bacteria will using too much bacteria generator enzyme called the lactamase. This mase, ASE, could hydrolyze the beta-lactam ring. And they have a specific name, penicillinase. Okay, so we're going to have to develop something. Now, penicillin G and penicillin V is naturally generated from penicillin. So this is a natural stuff. Now, the people are very smart, to be honest. Scientific area. Okay, I'm going to do a semi-synthesis. So they do a semi-synthesis. They created some magic stuff. What are they? And I tell you one thing, this one. They make it, we call it a bulker, more thick. And then this structure, because of this structure, will let them to be, prevent the lactamase. What I'm talking about, this is okay, it's right here. What is this thing? This is in the methicillin. So, in the history, methicillin is really good. Methicillin will resistant the attacking from the lactamase. So, it's a semi-synthesized antibiotics, semi-synthesized penicillin. Let it be more strong, more sustainable. However, you know, it's used too much. This guy comes out, MRSA. Nosocomial infection, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Not too long ago, it's failed. Okay, now we're going to do something. Because we find until here, the penicillin basically is working for gram-positive bacteria. How about the gram-negative bacteria? If the antibiotics only working for gram-positive bacteria, we call it a narrow spectrum. We need to become a broader spectrum. So what we do? Obviously, we're going to change this all. Is that right? Okay, how are we going to change it? People are very smart, to be honest. Oh, they do all this stuff. So what they do? They're going to add this guy right here. Okay, what is? If the O becomes this one, it is come out with ampicillin. Now, what's a good thing for ampicillin? When you see this NH2 base comes out, amino base comes out, what does it mean? It's easy to dissolve to the water, is that right? So it is more hydrophilic. Once it's more hydrophilic, what does it mean? They could be attacking the poring structure of gram-negative bacteria. Do you remember, if you look at the structure of gram-negative bacteria, we have a lipopolysaccharides, LPS. On the side, there's a poring area. This could be attacking there because it's hydrophilic, which means it could be dissolving a water a little bit. So ampicillin comes out. Ampicillin comes out. They start to working a little bit for gram-negative bacteria. Not enough. People find ampicillin maybe not a good choice. We need to have alternative. How do they do it? Okay, people are really, very smart. Do they do this? I'm going to add a hydroxy base right here. Become more dissolved in water. This comes out with amoxicillin. This is what you have so far. All the products, when you go CVS, you have teeth a little bit hurt. You have any type of the antibiotic treatments physician gave to you is amoxicillin. Because it's oral take, resistant to the stomach acid, broad spectrum antibiotics, and easily to be dissolved in the water because of hydroxy bonds in. Okay, that is a penicillin, how they work. Okay, now, even you try all these things, at the end of the day, you may still get a resistant. This has happened for what? Did we mention this, Khabib? Remember? Clostridium difficile. Where is the Clostridium difficile cause a problem? Because we using antibiotics too much. Continuously using for a week, we have a water diarrhea, have a cerebral membrane colitis because of the Khabib. So we call it antibiotic diarrhea. Use the diarrhea, okay? Now what are we going to do? And I said there are 3 treatments. Number 1, choose another antibiotics. What is that? Vancomycin. Okay, how vancomycin gonna work? Penicillin gonna attacking transpeptidase. Vancomycin, instead of I'm attacking enzyme, I'm going to attack you on the substrate. What is the substrate? The alanine. I'm going to attach to the amino acids. So I'm going to attach to the substrate. I don't let you have a reaction. So that's what a vancomycin works. So basically, this is work for the enzymes. That one is working for the amino acids. Remember, substrate, enzyme come out with products. I don't want these products to work because it's peptidoglycan. So what happened? Penicillin attacking enzyme, transpeptidase. Vancomycin attacking to the substrate, which is amino acid. So that's why this ionic C area comes out. However, it may not work. because bacteria could generate a multi-drug resistant phenomenon. What are we going to do? When the bacteria survive, they need all the precursor chemicals, which means the material to generate these peptidoglycan. Like you build a house, you need a brick. Is that right? Okay, I don't give you brick. When you build a house, I can break down. I can take out the woods, I can take out anything, take out the roof. I don't give you brick. I don't give you wood. You can build a house. That's what the basic tracing works. The basic tracing, they will be prevent precursor chemical transfer into the bacterial cell. Okay? So they don't let you give you original material to building peptidoglycan, so you're going to be stopped to building a house. You're going to be stopped to growing, which means inhibit. However, bacteria are really smart. You don't give me brick. I can have some metals, is that right? I can have some other material to build a house. So they have lots of bypass or alternative pathway to have nutrients to supply precursor material into the cell membrane system. So basic tracing only inhibit bacterial growth, which is we call it static. Not reducidal, not cidal, which means it's not going to kill bacteria. So this is a picture which is well explains what right there. Penicillin, which is the beta-lactam drugs, they're going to target which is on penicillin binding protein, which is transpeptase, which is enzyme. If it doesn't work, we're going to using vancomycin. Vancomycin is going to attack into the amino acid. If none of them are working, what are we going to do? I'm going to block you the precursor transfer. Therefore, we use basic tracing. By the way, we mentioned a basic tracing before. It is an A disc. Remember? The A disc to differentiate Streptococcus pyogenes and Streptococcus agalactiae, which is group A and group P Streptococcus. So this is we explain to you what is the inhibitory of the cell wall synthesis, and there's a development in the history about penicillin G, penicillin V, methicillin, ampicillin to amoxicillin. It becomes better and better from the chemical standpoints, but more and more antibiotics will become resistant to the bacteria because it's used way too much. And even today, you can see most of the antibiotics is working really well for gram-positive bacteria and not really well for gram-negative bacteria. Because gram-negative bacteria, their structure is more like hidden, especially the peptide glycan is very thin and the gram-positive is very thick. That's an obvious target for those antibiotics. Okay, so this is what I want to mention. Inhibition of protein synthesis, we will mention briefly. First of all, chlorophenicol. This is the one back in 1950s people are using a lot, but they do not use any time longer. Not used too much right now, only life-threatening situation. Because chlorophenicol will have a severe damage of the bone marrow system, which is the immune system. So people don't use this at all. This is basically is the first antibiotics we really do clinically in the world because it's killed everything basically. Second, tetracycline. Tetracycline right now, most of the time, is working in a veterinary science area. The bad thing for tetracycline is yellow teeth. If you're using tetracycline too much, you're going to generate yellow teeth is decaying. Aminoglycosides, same as tetracycline, working for 38 subunits. The two examples is streptomycin and gentamicin. This one will have a very strong side effect is hearing loss. If people are using gentamicin, streptomycin, that's back in 1950s, back in 1950s in Eastern China and the Eastern Asian country, people are using a lot. So the people at that age, right now is pretty much like 80, 90 years old. A huge population has a hearing loss because using gentamicin and streptomycin way too much. Now, the other things I want to mention, lactosamides, this one, not very effective for Cadiff. This one not very effective for Cadiff, and the other two will be a good alternative, same as vancomycin for penicillin, but we don't use that too often because more or less they have some side effects. Okay, so this is an inhibition for protein synthesis. This guy we will mention briefly. You can inhibit nucleic acid synthesis. Target is topoisomerase because it maintains a positive, negative supercoiled and closed DNA. A very easy example is fluoroquinolones, and some of them could attacking RNA polymerase, which is a rifampicin. This is the mechanism for these type of antibiotics. What they do is they're using in the lab for the research. So in our lab, we have a resistant E. coli, 0157H7. And they're growing on TSA agar. It's a selective media add RIF, which is 100 parts per million. Now, why we do these things? When we do a research in a food products, there is a natural bacteria there. There is a natural E. coli, maybe E. coli 0157H7 there. And we want our inoculated bacteria, the inoculated E. coli 0157H7 is the one we want inoculated. So we pre-market. We will let them grow in a solution with 100 ppm rifampicin. Then the bacteria, the chromosome, and the plasmid could be changed and then become rifampicin resistant. So the idea is that we want to, let's say I'm testing antimicrobials on the beef trimming surface. I want to inoculate E. coli 0157H7 there. I want to make sure the E. coli 0157H7 is the one we wanted. We inoculated is not one naturally existing on the surface. Then how we differentiate? We marker our E. coli 0157H7 become rifampicin resistant. So rifampicin resistant basically is using for the research in the lab. It's not really used in the clinical area. The reason is, I just mentioned, if anything targeted for nucleic acid synthesis, bacteria, lots of the alternative pathway will generate lots of mutations. So that's why this is not using in the lab too often, did not use in the clinical area too often. Okay, this is the one which is inhibition of metabolic pathway. May we mention about later, will be much more detailed. Bacteria need to synthesize folic acids, same as our human being. So they need a precursor chemical, which is PABA, para-aminobenzoic acids. There is a type of the antibiotics which is sulfur-laminated, which is we call it a sulfur drug. Remember, in the first class, I mentioned the sulfur drug is a chemical synthesized antibiotics. But we still think about it is antibiotics, but it is natural, not natural existing, which means it's not fit to the definition of this one, but it's still antibiotics. So what they do is that the sulfur drug, look at the structure, and the PABA looks very similar. So instead of the substrate will be using PABA, the substrate will be attached by sulfur drug. So the sulfur drug will be competitively grab the places supposed to be PABA, right now is a sulfur drug. So the metabolic pathway is prohibited. So they will not generate their required metabolic products. So that's a way to inhibit the metabolic pathway. But you know that the metabolic pathway, there's a multiple way bacteria can be using. So sulfur drug is only for static, which means they only inhibit the bacteria grow. They're not going to kill the bacteria. So that's a story for the inhibition of metabolic pathway. Last one, what we mentioned is integrity of the cell membrane, polymixing. That is leakage of cellular contents. A good example is ornament. It's only used for the skin surfaces. Because if you all take, what's going to happen? All the cell membrane permeability will be damaged. And this is a very good slide to give you the conclusion of the antibiotics or antibacterial drugs. They are target places for what they're going to work in. Okay? Some of them for cell wall, some of them for nucleic acids, for cell membrane, metabolic pathway, and protein synthesis. And we mentioned a bunch of here, they have a very strong side effects. Okay, so this is what I have for antibiotics, this section. Then we're going to move on to is the last section, which is we talk about broad-based knowledge for bacterial control. So how are we going to do bacterial control? Some of them we will be very briefly, some of them we're going to talk a little bit more detail. I'll left that whole board there because you may need to like to take a picture because it's talk about the penicillin and it's a very interesting topic we talk about. So let's talk about the broad-based concept for the microbial control. First of all, when we talk about the microbial control, we mentioned a couple of times there is a two terminology, static and cyto. Static, which means inhibit bacterial growth. Cyto is killing bacteria. And I want to mention one thing. How you understand about it? Do you remember the bacterial growth curve like this? Lag phase, log phase, stationary phase, and death phase. What means inhibit? Inhibit is the bacteria still going to grow. The only thing, the curve could be like this, which means they have a longer lag phase. So give you a very simple example to understanding what is inhibit. Whenever you buy a hot dog from the market, there is an antimicrobial there. When you see the label, there is a sodium nitrite, sodium diacetate, potassium lactate. It is antibiotics, antimicrobials. FDA, USDA approved to be used. But do you think they added that the hot dog could be used for like 10 years? No. Because they only inhibit the bacteria. At the end of the day, the sporage bacteria will grow. Now, why their shelf life could be extended a little bit? Could be using like, originally you have to get rid of them for a month. If you use antimicrobials, could be sustained maybe 3 months because their lag phase is extended. So that's an example for static. Now, cyto, what this means, which means the bacteria is killed. So what this means if you draw here, that doesn't even show up the curve, and the bacteria will directly die. So that's called the cyto. So cyto is killing bacteria, and the static, which is inhibitory bacteria. Now, of course, you see a bacteria static, fungi static. It just means, the suffix just means inhibition growth. Second, we also want to mention there is basically 3 different levels of control bacteria. Number 1, sterilization. Sterilization basically kills everything. What will be a good example for sterilization? Autoclave. And you use loop to burning in the flame. This is basically killing everything. All live cells. Okay, the second one. Disinfection. Disinfection usually will be killed vegetative cell, not endospore. So what is going to be a good example? 95% alcohol. We are using in the lab 95% alcohol is disinfection. Endospore does not work, vegetative cell is all died. Most of the time in your life, we talk about is sanitizing. This is a very low level reduction, actually. Is reducing microbial population below federal regulations. And I want to tell you what is the level for reduction. Most of the time, 3 to 4 log 10 CFU per ml. And I give you an example. COVID-19 for 3 years, lots of the sanitizing advertisement, you see it. The label saying curing 99.9% germs. You see these all the time, is that right? What this means? This means cure everything. Why did not write it 100%? I had a 1,000 cell. Okay, I'm gonna left 1 cell there after using this sanitizing. How many we cure that? Is that right? So how many is that? Is this correct? So how many? This is 3 log 10. This is 0 log 10. Remember 10, 0 equals 1. So, do you think these stuff are magic? No. They are killing 3 log bacteria. So give you an example. If your hands are really dirty, you using this germ to wash what they are left. How many they kill? That seems like a lot. Is that right? Seems like a lot. But you still have 1,000 bacterial cells there. That number is highly confusing because it's 3 log. Okay, some of them killing 99% of bacteria. That's even teasing you. That's only killing 100 cells. That's what it is if you know the concept behind it. It's a mess. That's why they write 99.9. Why they not write 100%? It's never going to reach because that's sanitizing. That's not disinfection and sterilization. So just keep in mind, it's some magic behind it. Okay? Antisepsis, that's definition, disinfection of the tissues. Usually we don't talk about in the food products too much. It's in the animals. We will mention a little bit later. Okay, microorganisms are not killed instantly. They usually killed expository also. Therefore, we come out with the time required to 90% of the bacteria in a target sample. We call it a decimal reduction time. We call it a d-value. And there is sometimes, it also happens, is the bacteria cannot growing or culturing on the media, but they will have a toxication. So we come out with viable but non-culturable. Okay, but once the viable and non-culturable they recover, they may regain the ability to reproduce and cause infection. This is a study which we are using a thermal inactivation, which means we have the bacteria there. We have a water bath. We set at a different temperature. Then, after heating certain time, we're going to do the sampling. And we'll see the bacterial temperature. Bacterial survival will be significantly decreased from 5 log to -1 log. And that's heating 121 degrees Celsius. Then we come out with these two figures. What are these? This is something we talk about in the food microbiology area is a lot. And we just briefly mention about here. This is we talk about 2 index to evaluate the thermal inactivation, which is d-value number 1. What is d-value? Time required to kill a target bacteria in a specific temperature, in a specific products. That's called d-value. So most of the time we will say D, E. coli. maybe 55C equals, let's say, 10 minutes, for example. What this means? This means if you heat this specific bacteria in a specific food product, let's say in a bacterial solution or like a liquid or like a juice, it needs taking 10 minutes to kill 90% of bacteria. Sorry, kill 90% of a bacteria. 90%, which means 1 log reduction. This equals 1 log. That is called d-value. So time required to kill 90% of a target bacteria in a specific food in a specific temperature. That's the d-value. Then we talk about another thing which is called z-value. What is z-value? Temperature required for changing 1 log difference of d-value. So how you understand about this? D55C maybe equals 10 minutes. D62C maybe equals 1 minute. And if you have a D75C, maybe only 10 seconds. Based on these information, you could calculate the z-value, which the temperature change to cause 1 log change of the d-value. 1 log change, which means a 90% change of the d-value. Okay, so that's a little bit tricky here. But all these things, you don't have to really do a manual calculation. You can do, but most of the time, we have a software could do this. This comes out, another discipline is a predictive microbiology. In my area, there's a predictive food microbiology. It is more complicated than these two curves. And I want to tell you one thing. These two curves is very linear. This is only for bacterial solution. If in a food products, what is going to be looks like? The curve basically looks like this. You have a shoulder at the beginning. It's like a leg face. So reason